Welcome to Spilling the Tea on Non-Monogamy with me, Gaz Darkwood. Spilling the Tea is a podcast dedicated to speaking with different people who practice non-monogamy in all of its forms to pull together as many different perspectives and experiences as possible all into one place. On each episode, I'll be joined by a different guest to talk about their own non-monogamy experiences. I'm always looking for more guests, as without you, there would be no podcast. So if you would like to be a guest, please send an email to spillingtheteapodcast@outlook.com. On this episode, I am joined by Suzy.
Hi,
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
You're more than welcome. I'm very happy to have you here. So to get started, do you mind just telling me how old you are and how long you've been practicing non-monogamy?
Yeah, of course. I am 52 years old. I've been exploring sort of polyamory or non-monogamy for just over 5 years.
Okay, that's cool. So when you say you started with polyamory and then added non-monogamy as a secondary, do you class yourself as polyamorous?
Yes, I do. And I'm aware that people use the terms sometimes interchangeably and sometimes completely not. So I guess to some extent it depends on how people define those two terms and whether they define them really differently.
Yeah, that's something that I've come across before that I think and I have mentioned this on the podcast previously that polyamory has become kind of an umbrella term, I think, for people that don't actually necessarily know about polyamory. Like that's become a bit of a buzzword, and people hear that and think they know what it means, and they hear about people in, say, open relationships, and they say, "Oh, they're poly," and
Mm.
that's not actually necessarily the case. But I still think of it as poly being kind of a subset or subcategory of non-monogamy.
Yes, and I think that's probably more accurate, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So, can you tell me what your current situation is? Do you have multiple partners, or are you solo poly, or what is your current situation?
Okay, so at the moment, I've got two main partners. One I've been with for over 5 years, so sort of right back very early in the beginning, when I was starting out on this journey, and that was a relationship that really helped me explore this idea, and sort of get used to the idea, I guess. Um, but I've got a second partner that I've been seeing for maybe sort of 4 months now, that I see less often. So my main partner I see for sort of 2 or 3 days a week, most weeks. And we are able to be together for those sort of 3 or 4 days at a time. And my other partner I'm seeing maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks for different events and things depending on our schedule. So he's also poly and has another partner as well.
It's interesting, isn't it, that when you enter the world of non-monogamy or polyamory, you realize how many other people are in that world as well. And like so often when you talk to people, it's like, oh, I've got a partner. They also have a partner. It's
Mhm.
it never stops. It always the polycule keeps extending.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, this is the situation I'm in now, but I did have a relationship for a couple of years where I was living with a partner and his wife, and then he had other partners as well. So that was quite a really different situation. And then right early on at the beginning, I was basically meeting people for just, like hookup dating, meeting in hotels, things like that. Really, just very, very casual. Didn't want a relationship at all. Wasn't really looking for anything at all. So that was, much sort of freer, and not really poly. It was more just, I guess, it was closer to sort of swinging, kind of just going out and having fun. But it was just me. So sort of very
Yeah.
different situations I've been through.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that you say that. Like, yeah, I personally wouldn't class that as poly. I think some people would, but it's something that I think is quite interesting. Like you said, maybe is closer to swingers, but actually, what I think when you were in that situation, or for anyone that's in that situation, people may label it as being non-monogamous or poly or swinger or whatever, but really, I think it's kind of just being single.
Yes, yeah, and to some extent, that's kind of what I wanted to do at that point. Was to just enjoy being sort of single and exploring by myself and meeting different people. And that was really very much what I set out to do. And then I sort of accidentally fell in love with someone, which wasn't really intentional, but that happens. That's the emotional connection that kind of happened. Um, so, and now I'm really happy having this sort of relationship where I have a very stable relationship that is part time, which gives me the chance to effectively almost be kind of single part time, like for more than half of the time. So I don't feel like I'm tied down. I'm able to feel independent and sort of in charge, whilst also having this sort of very solid, stable relationship that is backing up like my life in a way. So I don't know, maybe being completely alone isn't something that I've ever really done. So having a relationship is really good for me, but also at this point in my life, this is the first time that I felt this level of freedom, like a lot of people will have done when they've spent time being single. So that's really important to me as well.
Yes, it's quite nicely you use the word freedom because I think that's what a lot of people that I've talked to have used the word freedom in one way or another, and the more I hear it, the more I realize what a shackle monogamy actually is, and the fact that we're all kind of um, I use the word programmed. We're all programmed from birth through media, through films, through TV, through books to believe that monogamy is the norm and is the only way. But until until you free yourself of those shackles, you don't even really know that they're there. But
Yeah,
you don't know that that freedom is possible until you actually experience it.
yeah. I think I'm going to kind of disagree with you on that, though. I don't think it's so much that we are programmed for monogamy. I think that from a very early age, we're programmed for the happily ever after ending, which happens to be in a monogamous relationship, because that's the way our society is set up. So, yeah, it is monogamous, but it's also this idea that you follow the right path and that you meet someone, you fall in love. Usually, well, in fairy tales from an early age, the princess gets rescued by the prince charming, and then the next day they get married, everybody celebrates, and that's the end of the story. They just live happily ever after. Um, but of course, life isn't like that. And I think there's a this sort of sense from a lot of people, well, from some people, that the idea of this freedom is like, well, you're not, if you're having freedom within a relationship, then you've got no commitment, and that those two things are very separate. But I tend to think of it more in terms of when you get married in our normal sort of society, you get married and then that's it. That was your day, your big wedding that you spent 2 years planning and everything. And then you don't really, I've known people that get married and that they've spent so much time thinking about the day of the wedding without really having any thought about being married afterwards.
Yes,
So, and those relationships can break down. And it's kind of like, well, where's the commitment if all you've thought about is the getting married bit, but you haven't really considered the commitment of staying and being married? Now, I like the idea of in like pagan um, or Wiccan weddings where you have a hand fasting ceremony, which is for a year and a day. And again, I've known people that have had this, and they have had the criticism that it's not showing commitment. But I can't think of anything more committed than after a year, you have to stay married, you have to do it again. And if you choose to, your partner in that case isn't just, oh, well, we loved each other and got married 30 years ago. That is someone who actually went through a positive decision to marry you again every single year for 30 years, if that's how long that relationship lasts. Does that make sense? I think there's a way more commitment in having to make that decision to stay married, if or stay with that partner. And that kind of transfers into the idea of polyamory, where because you have the freedom and the independence, that sort of level of freedom to go off and meet other people and potentially have other romantic or play relationships. That could just be fun, it could just be occasional, it could be someone else that you love dearly and deeply. But if you have that freedom and you still choose to stay with someone, then that to me sounds like a lot more commitment than, having got married some years ago and that's just it now. We're married forever.
Yeah, I'm completely with you in multiple ways actually, and I think like so I I'm a little bit of a masochist for going online and reading negative things about things that I enjoy or am interested in. And one of the things is like that I see quite often is people, ripping apart polyamory, non-monogamy, open relationships. And so often you see this thing of like people that are non-monogamous just can't commit. If the only reason they're doing it is because they can't commit to someone. I'm like, no, I'm actually more committed to this person because I can go and do things with other people and still come back to them, or vice versa. Like my partner
Mm,
is extremely committed to me because they can go off and do things with other people. That's completely fine, and yet they still come back to me every
yeah,
time. That is
exactly.
an extra level of commitment that I think a lot of monogamous people just can't comprehend.
Yes. And the idea that that person comes back to you not because of, like, some legal tying down, but simply because they want to. Every single day, they want to come back to you and spend time with you, because they love you and want to see you and be with you is so much better. I guess it's a bit like, a bird in the hand is worth two in the cage kind of
Yeah,
idea, something
yeah,
like that. It's, having that sort of freedom and having that wild thing that comes to you is so much different. I mean, wild birds are not wild and wonderful if they're caged. So
yeah,
tying ourselves down with a, marriage and then just in your mind that that's it for the rest of your life. You've got to be with this person now. Doesn't give you that sort of constant choice. And if the best commitment you can give someone is that you'll do your best not to be unfaithful to them, then
yeah.
I don't think that's a particularly great level of commitment.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, I completely agree. And like you said, that thing, if that's the most they can do to commit is being faithful, that what does that say about the rest of the relationship? Like that you could be completely indifferent to each other, hardly ever talk to each other, don't
Yeah,
spend any real time together. But as long as they're not um having an affair or they're not doing anything with someone else, you're in a committed relationship. But
yeah,
committed in that sense doesn't mean loving, and it definitely doesn't mean happy.
yes, exactly. To be honest, I found, I mean, I started off, like you say, in something that wasn't really polyamory, but was uh, playing freely, being single, enjoying that. And when I fell in love with my partner, um, it was accepted from the beginning that I wasn't going to be tied down, and neither was he. That wasn't the nature of our relationship, and still isn't. Because he could only offer me his time part of the time because of, sort of work and family commitments and so on. So it allows it was always accepted. That was the expectation from the beginning, that this would be a polyamorous relationship where I was able to go and date other people. And I ended up living, like I say, with somebody else for a couple of years, which was great. That was good. And there were some conflicts between those two relationships because the person that I was living with wanted my time more than I was really willing to give, and I'd moved there. But a lot of that upset was to do with the fact that it was during the COVID lockdowns, that sort of period of sort of 2020 and into 21,
Yeah,
where I wasn't able to see my main partner for a period of months and months and months. And then when that changed and I went back to sort of like, "Oh, well, he's now available and I want to go and see him," the partner that I was living with and had been living with through that year, um, didn't wasn't perhaps prepared to actually handle it, very well. But I want to sort of stress that that problem, that relationship finished not because of us being polyamorous, although that particular conflict was difficult, but the relationship broke down because our relationship didn't really work out. It wasn't compatible enough to carry on. It wasn't because it was polyamorous. Does that make sense? Relationships do break down. And I was able to leave and I moved on to somewhere else. And now I'm in a really happy place where I've got my two partners. I've actually just started chatting to someone else online that I'm potentially going to have a date with. I don't know if that will go anywhere. It might just be a friendship. But being able to go and date someone or go and meet up with people, most of the people that you meet up with, you might be friends. You might really dislike them when you finally meet them. Um, Having the freedom to sort of meet up with someone, and neither of my partners mind that I'm going to meet up with someone that potentially could become a relationship, or that I might actually, God forbid, have sex with somebody else. It allows me to make friendships much more freely as well, which means that I have a really wide range of friends, sort of male, female, non-binary friends, um, without being restricted by a partner that is sort of trying to hang on to me and be jealous about me actually spending time anywhere else. And that's really, you know, a wonderful thing, because it affects so much more of my life than just my relationships.
Yeah, definitely, and that's one of the things that and again, the word freedom um comes up, but one of the like sort of
Mm.
key aspects to non-monogamy or polyamory, if you want to get that specific of it, for me, is that freedom that I can, not necessarily that I can do whatever I want. I mean, obviously that is true to an extent, but that any potential relationship can potentially be anything. Like I could bump into someone on the street, I could chat to someone online, we could end up dating, we could end up hooking up one time, we could end up having a hooking up consistently over a period of time. We could end up
Mhm.
as friends who just chat and message every now and then. We could end up as people that like we're into the same band, so we go to see live music. It could be that there's literally anything, everything is a possibility,
Yeah,
and it's all okay. There's no one getting jealous of it, regardless of what it is. There's nothing holding me back to say, oh well, you can only do X, Y, and Z with this person because the relationship you're in means that your partner might get jealous, or it's just not allowed within the confines of the relationship, whatever. So it
yeah,
doesn't matter. I can talk to whoever I want, and anything can be anything. And I'm not looking for um like anything romantic at all. And I'm most of the time not looking for anything sexual either. But it's nice to know that that is always an option. It's never off the
yeah.
table. It's always a possibility.
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand that, that freedom to, well, like I say, it makes a lot of difference in my life that I now have more friends than I used to, than I have done. So during my whole life, I've had 3 sort of major long-term relationships that lasted sort of like 9, 8, 9, 10 years. All 3 of those relationships, looking back, I think probably should have finished after a year or 2. But I was in a committed relationship, and so we stayed together. And it didn't make me happy. Those relationships didn't make me happy long term. Um, and I think there is something about the happily ever after ending is puts a lot of responsibility on the person that you are getting together with or marrying, that you are saying, right, I'm with you now, and therefore I expect you to fulfill every single one of my needs. I need you to be my friend and my lover and my carer, and I need you to be everything for me. And not sort of not just sexually, but for instance, there may be, you might like have different types of sex with different people. Um, if you're polyamorous, or if you're, sort of non-monogamous, then you've got that chance, because maybe your partner doesn't like this particular thing, but you have another partner that you do that particular thing with. But it isn't just about the sexual nature; it's about other things. I mean, my partner that I lived with him and his wife, he had a friend that wasn't, as far as I know, ever a sexual partner. But that was the friend that he went to watch horror movies with. And
Yeah.
he had another friend that he used to go and have curry with, because me and his wife both didn't like curry. So he would go and have a curry, and that's, if you want to be with someone and you are going, right, you now have to fulfill everything, all of my desires. And if you don't, then I'm just going to have to not have that thing. Like, I'm never going out without you, therefore I'm never going to have curry again. I mean, people would start to question if that was a normal thing. And yet, somehow, when you break it down into that, that's kind of what we're doing when you get into a marriage, into a monogamous relationship, is that you're promising that you will fulfill that person's every need and that you expect them to do that for you. And I think that's too much responsibility. I'm a complex person. I have all sorts of weird needs. I mean, it's too much for one person to deal with me, surely. And lots of people must feel like that. It feels like I'm in a much more grown up place. It's like I grew out of the fairy tale and now I'm can have a grown up relationship where I'm able to discuss and be really, really open about what I want and what I need out of a relationship. And if the person that I'm with is struggling or doesn't like the idea or is unable to fulfill some of those needs, then they are happy for me to find that somewhere else. And that just feels a lot more caring and grown up to me than the happily ever after ending we were taught as in fairy tales.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think so. You said a few things there, which I've got responses to, but what I want to start with is just because you specifically mentioned horror films, which is exactly my wheelhouse. But that's an analogy that I tend to use is going to the cinema to watch a film, and the idea of someone having to be your everything and not wanting to. So, for instance, I'm really into horror films. If one of my
Mhm.
partners, so if I was in a monogamous relationship and my partner says um, is into, I don't know, action films. And I'm only into horror films. They're not into horror films, but they come to see a horror film with me because they don't enjoy it, but just because they feel like they have to, because they have to be that for me. And then they
Yeah,
expect me to go and watch an action film with them, even though that's not my thing. I don't want to, but I'd be expected to go to it because that's how things work. And I think
yeah,
with polyamory, I have like I don't need one partner to be that thing for me. I can go and watch horror films with someone else, and
yeah,
they are free to take someone else with them to go and watch action films. And one of
exactly.
the reasons I like to use this as an analogy is I think for monogamous people, if monogamous people were in this situation, and if a monogamous person said to their partner, "I'm going to go and watch this film at the cinema. Do you want to come with me?" and their partner said, "No, I'm not interested. Go with someone else," and they took a friend, like this is in no way romantic, no way sexual,
Mm,
would they be jealous? Would the partner be expected to be jealous? Or if that was them, if their partner came to them and said, "Do you want to see this film with me?" and they said, "No, I'm not interested. You can go with someone else," and they took their friend, not sexual, not romantic in any way, would they be jealous about it? I don't think they would. But for some reason, when it comes down to romantic feelings or sexual expression, suddenly there's this big thing of like, whoa, 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 whoa. It's weird. It's okay for your partner to go to the cinema with someone else to go see a film that you didn't want to watch. That's completely fine. But for them to want to go and have sex with someone else, that's a massive no-no. And
yeah.
in my head, I can't figure out the difference between those things because to me, it's all the same.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. It's I guess to some people, I understand that some people would find it harder to separate sort of sex from emotion, but I don't believe that it's impossible. And I'm not convinced that the idea that women can't separate sex from emotion, but men can. I don't think that's particularly true either. I think women are very capable of having, you know, sex separate from an emotional relationship. They possibly don't, but there's a whole lot of other reasons behind that, I think. Um, but yeah, having sort of a polyamorous relationship where you can have feelings and an emotional connection with more than one person is also something that is completely possible. And people do question it, but we don't question it in any other situation, only with the one partner in a monogamous relationship. Because we all understand that you love more than one child. We all understand that you probably love both of your parents or, your sisters and brothers or other people. If you're a teacher, you would presumably love all of the children under your care. as children under your care in the same way. You love your friends in different ways. This is all fine, but as soon as we're talking about, an actual monogamous, like, sexual partner, you can't love anyone else as well, and I
Yeah.
don't really understand how people come to that conclusion.
No, no, I don't. And for an analogy I like to use for that is tea and coffee. So I really like drinking tea. I really like drinking
Mhm.
coffee. I will drink both within the same day. And
Yeah,
when I have a cup of tea, I'm not turning my back on coffee. I haven't stopped liking coffee. I haven't suddenly all my feelings for coffee haven't disappeared because now all my feelings gone for tea. After I've had that cup of tea, later on, I will probably have a coffee, and then my feelings
yeah,
for tea haven't gone away. I've got the capacity to enjoy drinking tea and enjoy drinking coffee, and
yes,
that's a very basic way of putting it. But I think that to me that explains it all. When people say like, "What? How can you have feelings for this person and you've got them for these person?" It's like you do that as well. Everyone does that, and like you
yes,
said, one thing with like with your children or with your parents, like, do you only love one of your parents? I mean, some people may have parents they don't get on with whatever way, so I don't want to paint
yeah,
everyone with the
of
same
course.
brush there. But as an example, and like you say with friends, does everyone only have one friend? No,
Yeah,
I don't think I know anyone that
exactly.
only has one friend. Everyone has more than one friend, and with each of those friends, they're different people. They're not a clone of each other. So you have certain things in common with one, and you have certain
Mm,
things in common with another. And like as an
yeah,
example for that, like sometimes if I see like a funny meme or video or something, so I have two partners. Sometimes I'll see something that I find funny, and I think this partner will like that. I send it to them. Sometimes I'll see something that I think's funny, and I go, oh, this my other partner will like that. I'll send it to them. And
yes,
sometimes I think actually both of my partners will like this. I'll send it to both of them.
yes, yeah,
And so there is like even that there is a thing that people are separate, but then there also is crossover. It's also because I think another thing that people, something that I read sometimes, which I think is actually quite harmful, is people see polyamory as a way of filling holes, which is to say, I don't know, one partner fills up say 90% of their interests and they go, okay, well, I've got this 10% that I need to fill. So I want to find
yeah,
someone specifically to fill that. But no person is going to pigeonhole themselves specifically to fit that 10%. They're their whole
yeah,
person as well. So as much as you may only want that 10% from them, you're going to have to take
mhm,
the 100% of them. And they're going to
yes,
expect more than just 10% from you as well. Um,
yes,
so I really don't like that whole thing of people like, oh, well, I'll have this person for this person for this. I'm like, no, you can have multiple people for all the same things, but those same things
mhm,
may be done in slightly different ways.
yeah, yeah. Because ultimately, yeah, I mean, I guess wanting particular people for, like, a particular sexual practice is kind of something that m is the sort of thing that you might do. I don't know, is that even a swinging thing? To go, I wanna have a threesome, so therefore I go to the swingers club and have a threesome there. I mean, it might be, but you might do that with your partner. So that's a slightly different thing, isn't it? That's looking for, I don't know, particular sort of sexual thrill in certain ways might be something you're exploring. I think that's somewhat separate from how your relationship works.
Yeah, and I
So
think that's
you're not finding a person to fill that hole so much, because if you get into a relationship, even if it's a fairly casual relationship with, that person, like you say, that you're not only doing that one thing with them. It might be that you both have an interest in threesomes, and so you regularly do that thing with that person. But if you're also, casually seeing them, it's almost like, to go back to your films, it might be that, you see a horror film with your friend, you meet a new friend to see horror films with, but they might also like, action horrors, action thrillers, something like that, and so you sort of branch off and you might go and see those films with them as well. Does that even work as an analogy?
no, no, yeah, I think it does because that's the thing. Like, they're not only filling your horror film hole,
Yeah.
they've got other aspects to them which will come out in the relationship as well. Because
Yes.
there's you
Yeah.
can't take a person just for the one thing that you want from them because they've got other things to offer, and you'll probably find that
Yes.
actually you are compatible in other ways, and
Yeah.
you don't get just a small thing. You take the whole package, not just
Yeah.
It's
So it
not just
might
the
be
one
that
thing that's missing from your life. You know, oh, I want someone to
yeah,
go watch horror films with. I'm going to look for someone that wants to do that because odds are you're not going to find that because the person you do find is probably going to want more than that
yeah,
from
they probably want something like, they wanna go to Nando's before the horror film or something.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like they want the whole relationship, but they just want something a little bit more than just the horror films. So yeah, I want to go to the horror films, but actually, I want
yeah.
someone that I can text with during the week about something else, or or
Mhm.
go to Nando's or any little thing. It um, could be anything completely different to that. To be honest,
Yeah.
yeah.
Other chicken shops do exist.
Yeah, I was going to say like how many people are listening to this that aren't in the UK going, "What the fuck is Nando's?"
It's an international one, isn't it, Nando's? Sells
I have no
chicken. It's
idea.
good chicken.
Yeah, it's a chicken place. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of one step up from KFC, I guess.
Oh, a couple of steps up from KFC, surely.
So,
Mm.
yeah, one thing I was going to bring up as well was I assume you know about the relationship escalator because that seems to be one of the early things most people learn when exploring polyamory.
I've heard it in different places about different things. So tell me what you think the definition is.
Okay, so how I know it, and I'm sure I've talked about this in the podcast before, but this just because this ties into some of the things that we were talking about is the relationship escalator is picture it like an escalator. Stairs that you stand on, they go up, they escalate, they keep going up. And in traditional monogamous relationships, people get into relationships and they ride the escalator. So first thing is you meet and then you escalate to going on a date, you escalate to going on multiple dates, you may then end up living together, you may then end up getting married, you may then end up having kids, and this is like almost a predetermined path that people
Yes.
or say predetermined expectations that people put on themselves within monogamous relationships where they think this is how a relationship has to go. And
Yeah.
so one of the first things I think most people learn when exploring polyamory specifically is that the relationship escalator exists and you don't have to ride it. And
Yes.
I think this
Exactly.
is a problem a lot of people have and especially as you were saying earlier, that when people rush like they rush towards not rush towards getting married, but all they're thinking about is planning the wedding and they're thinking about the wedding, they're thinking about the wedding. And then when the wedding has happened, they go, oh shit, now what? Like
Yeah.
shit, have we got to the
Yeah.
end of the escalator? What's the next step? And there doesn't always
Yeah.
have to be a next step. And I personally don't think relationship should be thought of as always looking for the next step. Like if you're happy with the way the relationship is, just enjoy it. And
Mhm.
coming back to
Yeah.
something you were talking about early on, that your say I don't know if you refer to it as primary, but your main relationship, your partner you've been with for the longest, is part time and you only see each other 3, 4 days a week. Like
Yes.
most people or most monogamous people would end up by that point wanting more than that. And they're like, well, let's move in together. Let's spend more time together. We want to see each other every day. But and you can obviously attest to this that actually it's fine to step off the escalator at the place where you are and you're happy and you're comfortable because
Yeah.
like you said, you like to have your own space and you like to have your own time and have that freedom. And if you carried on riding the escalator, you'd actually end up losing some of those things. And then you'd be, even if you wouldn't necessarily be unhappy in your relationship, you'd be unhappy in your life because you've lost some of the things that you had that are actually important to you.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. That is exactly how I feel. I love the time that we have together. And that time can be really intense and it's really close and supportive. And we have contact, the rest of the time, but it's I like being able to go, actually, yeah, tonight I don't have to do anything. I'm, going to finish work for the day and I'm just going to sit and make myself steak and chips for dinner and play Xbox. And I don't have to do anything for anybody else. Don't have to deal with any other people. And that can be really nice sometimes. Um, and it also gives me a chance to sort of, go and visit friends and, just go and be social if I feel like I want to be, without having to check in with a partner, sort of, "Oh, I'm going out on Thursday. Oh, I wanna go and see this person. Oh, I wanna," and then potentially have someone, like a partner who's going, "Well, hang on a minute. I haven't seen you all week because you keep going off to see other people." And, yeah, I have my own time. It's my own time to do with however I want. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, that you get monogamous relation people that are in monogamous relationships that maybe end up in a place that they didn't necessarily want to be, but they just feel like that's where they have to be. Like that's how relationships work. Like, of course, we're going to spend most of our time together because that's what people in relationships
Yeah.
do. And actually, I think that's something that leads to, and also that, like I said, this whole thing of pigeonholing, like each partner ends up having to feeling like they have to engage in the other one's hobbies, even though they don't actually enjoy it because they think, well, that's what you do as a partner. Um,
Yes.
my partner wants to go see action films, therefore I have to go with them. And actually, I'm not really happy with it, and it actually bugs me. And it's only a little bit, but each time it happens, it eats away at me a little bit more until eventually I start to resent
Yeah.
my partner for it.
Yeah.
And that's the and you hear about it's funny. Something I read online all the time is how open relationships, non-monogamous relationship, polyamorous relationships never work. They have such a high failure rate, and I think, what? Hang on. Monogamous relationships have such a high failure rate. If I went and talked to every single monogamous person I know and said, "Do you have an ex?" they will all say yes. And having
Yeah.
an ex means you had a relationship which
That
ended. And that's
failed.
not to say
Yes.
failed. I don't like to use the term
Yeah.
failed because sometimes things just don't work out the way you expected, and there shouldn't be an end goal and it's a failure if you don't reach it. It's just sometimes things don't work out. But the fact that people have an ex shows that at some point they had a relationship which didn't work out. So it's very hard to say that non-monogamous relationships don't work when actually a lot of monogamous relationships don't end up working out long term either. That
Yeah.
actually brings me to another thing, which something which I think people do, which isn't helpful, is put a lot of importance on permanence. And
Mhm.
people strive that when they have something and people get into relationships, like, this has to last forever, this is it now, like, and like you say, when people get married, this is it, we're doing this until we die. But
Yeah.
why? Because not everything should be permanent. Like, it's okay to do things temporarily. It's okay. In fact, it's not only is it okay, I think it's really healthy to stop doing things when they don't make you happy anymore. And that could
Yeah.
be anything, it could be a hobby. If you've got I think a lot of people actually stress themselves out. I hear this and I read this online where people say, "Oh, I used to love doing this hobby, but I haven't done it in a long time. I feel really bad about that. Oh, I wish I could do it again." Like, but hang on, if you haven't got the time now or anything, then that's fine. You shouldn't be forcing yourself to do something just for this idea of like you have permanence or you're having to constantly be doing this. It was fun while you were doing it 4 years ago. You really enjoyed your time with it. That's a good thing. That's positive.
Yeah.
It's okay to be
Yeah.
left alone as that. You don't have to keep doing this thing all through your life just because you started it. It's okay for it to be temporary. And I would much rather look back fondly on hobbies which I enjoyed, and I gave up on, than be stressing over the fact that I can't fit that hobby into my life anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said about this concept of failure in relationships is really important as well, because it unless people are gonna define, I mean, is a relationship only a success if you literally follow that escalator, stay on the escalator until the end when you drop off the end into death? Because I think that possibly polyamorous or, non-monogamous relationships, you're probably dealing with people that have a much higher level of communication, because there has to be so much communication when you're dealing with multiple partners, if only just to keep track of who's seeing who when. Um, that I know people, I have friends who have come to the end of a relationship, sometimes after years, and they've just mutually agreed that the relationship has run its course and their lives are going in different directions, they're exploring different things. And I would consider that to be the most successful relationship. If you've been with someone for however long, for a time where you had an amazing time, and then you go your separate ways, both incredibly happy with each other, still being able to remain friends, I think that's the most successful ending to a relationship. Certainly,
Yeah, I completely agree.
it doesn't make it successful, like you say, if you just basically don't like each other anymore, but you're still married and living in the same house. That doesn't sound like a successful relationship. That just or a successful marriage. And I know some people do it, and it's lovely when you meet those couples that fell in love when they were young and have been married for 60 years and still love each other. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that, fell in love and got married, and then 60 years later, they just try not to spend too much time with their partner. So, I think that the measure of success, I mean, that idea of what is a failure has to be defined. And I do think that people who are polyamorous probably have a much, much better idea of what they are hoping to achieve or hoping to get with relationships. And they probably talk about that a huge amount more than a lot of monogamous couples do, which is, the communication is so, so important. Um, so people sort of starting out on this journey, whether that's exploring non-monogamy from the basis of a relationship you're already in, or whether you're currently single and you're looking at possibly, this is a lifestyle sort of choice. um, I think you have to really think about, how much you're going to communicate with people about all sorts of things, about your emotions and about the diary management, which can be complex, but about the things that you want and about your feelings and about how you're going to deal with potentially if there's any jealousy involved. There's just so much to talk about, and you have to be able to communicate. It's just so important.
It's funny. I think you're the first guest that I've had on the podcast with who has actually directly addressed the listeners, and I quite like that. That was quite good. It saved me having to do it. Um, but no, yeah, I'm with you. The whole communication thing, and that this is something which I have spoken about on the podcast before, is that when people are exploring polyamory, no, actually, that's not where I'll start. I'll start with when we start to explore polyamory, there are certain things that we learn right from the get-go, and I think one of them is the whole relationship escalator thing. But the
Mhm.
key thing, the most important thing, is communication, and that goes in every direction. Um, and that comes back a little bit to what we were talking about previously, where with different partners wanting different things, having different availability, and things like that, and all of that comes from communication. And one of the first things you learn when exploring polyamory is how to communicate well. And that's not only being able to have conversations with your partner or with people, but that's being able to openly just discuss people. It's so easy now. If I meet someone new, it's so easy for me to, and we start getting on well. It's so easy for me to say like, so like should, what should we escalate this? Like, hey, do you want to meet up? Should we get a hotel room or something? Like, or yes or no? Okay, fine, that's cool. I just didn't know where we're at. Like, are we hanging out as just friends, or are we doing this? Do you want to go to a
Yeah.
kink event together, or do you want to get a hotel room? Anything. And I wouldn't have been able to do that a few years ago. But it also comes with talking to your partners as well, that being able to say to them and to be able to express your feelings, to be able to tell someone if you're feeling jealous, for instance, or but and then it even expands to not just that. Like if you're not feeling well mentally, if your mental health suffering, being able to openly say to someone that is important to you or cares about you, like, I'm struggling, can you help me? But it goes the opposite way, where I think by being polyamorous and being around polyamorous people and interacting with polyamorous people, you are comforted by the fact that they also know this level of communication. So they're not going to shun you. Like I can feel quite comfortable saying these certain things to people with open
Mhm.
communication because I know that they understand where I'm coming from and they can accept it. Whereas a monogamous person wouldn't necessarily do that. And something that I think, and this is something that I have said in the podcast before, is that those key aspects that we first learned when researching into polyamory is the communication. I think not just people that are exploring polyamory, exploring non-monogamy, even monogamous people, and especially monogamous people, I think would do so well to learn about the level of communication that polyamorous people kind of do as standard, because I think that would change so many monogamous relationships for the better. I know a few people who are in monogamous relationships who are clearly unhappy and they won't do anything about it. They will vent
Yeah.
and moan about their partners, but they won't do anything about it because they don't understand that
Mhm.
like it's okay to communicate with your these things with your partners. And one person recently she said I can't remember the idea of getting changed at home or something, and she said that she hadn't seen her husband naked in years and isn't about to start doing it now.
Wow.
And this is someone that will be like, "Oh, I've been married 20 years." Like,
Yeah,
have they been a happy 20 years? Because this doesn't sound like especially a couple that are married and have been together 20 years, they shouldn't be repulsed by the idea of seeing each other naked.
that
Like,
doesn't sound like a successful relationship, does it?
no, it doesn't at all. But I'm like, but there's clearly no communication there. Like, if you're not, why are you staying in this relationship? You should be able to communicate with your partner and say, if they had the the tools and the skills to be able to openly communicate well, I don't think they would be in that position after
Yeah,
20 years. They would either have talked about the fact that the relationship isn't working for them anymore, or they would have said, these aspects aren't working, can we change them? And they'd be in a completely different situation. And I
yeah,
just think that level of communication, if everyone learnt that, if that was a subject taught at school or whatever,
yeah,
every relationship would be much better off for it,
yeah,
and including or even specifically monogamous relationships would, people in monogamous relationships in general would be so much happier, and maybe the relationships wouldn't end on such bad terms either. People
yeah,
would be able to communicate and say, look, I'm not happy. Oh, are you not? Okay, maybe we're not compatible anymore, we go our separate ways, rather than
yes.
just growing to resent each other more and more as time passes, and then everything ends in some sort of big explosion.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I've actually got a really, kind of cute little story. So at New Year's, this year, so a couple of months ago, I had arranged to go with my second partner, my other partner, as it were, who I'd only been dating for a couple of months, and neither of us were doing anything. So I spent the weekend, spent like 2 nights with him, and on the second night, so on the 1st of January, he'd booked a hotel with like a little spa as a bit of a treat. Because it was cheaper, obviously, than on the 31st of December. So we went away on the 1st, which was lovely. And that night, when we went to bed, I was lying there and I felt, out of the blue, really, or it felt like it was out of the blue. I felt actually really quite emotional and quite teary, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But because I was able to communicate and I was able to say to him, look, I'm feeling really emotional and I feel a bit upset. And we talked a little bit, and I said, I think actually what it is that this is the first time for quite some time, like a good number of months, probably well over a year actually, that I'd actually slept, not had sex with, but actually slept with someone other than my most regular partner, than my longer term partner. Um, and it felt a bit kind of weird, like it was the first time. So I guess it was making me feel that I was missing my main partner. And because I was able to communicate that without worrying that the guy I was with was going to be like, "Oh, well, you don't want to be with me then." And he actually understood that totally because he was also missing his other partner who lives at the other end of the country. So they see each other sort of week on, week off. And he understands that. So he was able to just sort of say, okay, well, just imagine like this is a really big bed, he said, because it's a big hotel bed. So just imagine that I'm here and you're there in the middle and your other partner is there on the other side of the bed. Um, and that just kind of reframed it for me and put both of them back into my mind without any conflict. And which is a bit of a NLP kind of move, really, but it really helped. And because I was able to say, actually, yeah, I'm lying here with you and I'm cuddling up to you, but I'm missing someone else, is something that I wouldn't have. I think most people wouldn't be able to cope with the idea of that. Like, that's an unusual thing to do. Certainly, from a monogamous point of view, that wouldn't ever happen. So that was a really nice, like, little moment that I was able to communicate that really clearly. So,
Yeah, that is really nice, and I'm sure that's a nice thing to experience, and the fact that it's had that much of an effect on you, I feel like that's something that you're not like to forget anytime soon either.
mhm. Yeah,
That's a happy memory that's going to stick with you for a while.
yeah,
But yeah, you're completely right in a monogamous relationship or in a monogamous, let's say, mindset, that sort of thing would never work. What? How dare you be thinking of someone else when you're here with me? But yeah, you're open to communicate, and then your partner was open to hear you, and then come up with solutions. And I think that's one of those things that people panic a bit about with the idea of jealousy. I've had this conversation where um, I've talk to monogamous people about being polyamorous or non-monogamous, and they've said like, "Oh, what? So your partner has sex with other people?" And like, yeah. Oh, I wouldn't be able to handle that. Like, well, why is that? Why is it that you can't handle that? Because actually, it's
Mm.
not. And it's I think the thing that they think is they panic and worry that if their partner is with someone else, that's it, that you're forgotten about. But actually,
Yeah.
odds are that's not the case. If you're that important to someone, you're always in their head somewhere. And especially when doing things that you may do together, you're going to be reminded of that person. If it's like staying in a hotel room, like in your case, sleeping in a bed with someone when you're used to only sleeping in a bed with this one other specific person, of course you're going to think about them in that
Yeah.
point. And that doesn't mean that you're not interested in the person you're with. It doesn't mean your mind's turned back to your other partner. You're still there. You're
Mhm.
still in the moment. It can be more than one thing at a time. You can be with one person and thinking about the other person, but you're still 100% there.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Uh, because let's face it, if you think that as a monogamous person, if you think that every moment that you're with your partner, they are only thinking about you, then you are really lying to yourself because they are
Yeah.
not just thinking about you the whole time. They're thinking about all sorts of other stuffs going through their head. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's those memes where it's like, oh, it's got like a couple in bed next to each other, and one of them's they've got speech bubbles above their head or thought bubbles, and one
Mhm.
of them's like, oh, I bet they're thinking about other people, other women or other men or whatever. Then it comes to the other thought bubble, and it's just some complete fucking nonsense. Like,
Yes.
I sometimes my mind wanders to fucking really random places. And like, I can be thinking about a cartoon that I watched when I was fucking 8 years old. And
Mhm.
if someone sat there thinking, "Oh, I bet he's thinking about other people," like, I'm not. I'm thinking about absolute fucking gibberish a lot of the time,
Yes.
just
Yes.
random shit. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's something I've seen before as well. That I've seen online. People worrying that their partner's cheating because I keep seeing them like they're on their phone a lot, and I keep seeing them smiling at their phone. And why would you be smiling at your phone? Like it gives this impression that they're really happy about this person they're talking to, or like they're in love with this person because they're smiling when they look at their phone. I smile at my phone all the time because I have friends that send me really fucking funny things, and
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not in love with them, and I don't have romantic or sexual feelings for them. I've been sent a message and I found it funny and I smiled.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird like thing that people put on people, like, oh, you're smiling at your phone, therefore you must be cheating or you must be having an affair. And I think that says a lot more about the person themselves and their level of insecurity, that they assume that seeing
Yeah.
their partner smile means that they're having an affair or they're going to leave them for someone else or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's about their level of security or lack of security, um, because I feel, um, like my partners have other partners, and I've my second partner now, has, 2 other partners regularly. He's dating, as well, so he's got a couple of people that he's just started dating that and, those relationships may or may not turn out to be relationships, or they may just be friendships, who knows where that might go. Um, but I've met his, main partner who lives, like I say, quite a long way the other end of the country, so that's a sort of a week on, week off type of thing. He's got, but we've all met, and I've had both of them over to my place for dinner with my main partner, so we've all had dinner together, and that's just a really lovely thing, and the fact that, some of us have sex with some of the others has not been in any way a problem or stopped us from liking each other. Now, I'm glad that all 4 of us did like each other,
Yeah.
and that my 2 partners seem to really get on, that's a lovely thing. And it might not for everybody. Maybe you have partners who really just don't get on, in which case that's not gonna end up with you all having dinner around the table together, maybe as a regular thing. But for me, that did, and that was a really lovely moment having everyone, like the 4 of us together. Um, so it that there's no reason why the fact that that there's been sexual relationships involved doesn't stop you from liking other people. somehow. I don't really understand now why monogamous relationships have this idea that once sex is involved, it changes the nature of that relationship so drastically and becomes an only thing. So, like, it's okay for you to work with someone and spend 8 hours a day with them every day, but if you get a bit of a, if they get a bit of a fumble in the stationery cupboard at the works party, then suddenly you've been, that constitutes a completely a breakdown of your other relationship. I didn't
Yeah,
explain that very well, but does that make sense? It's like, especially with like people we work with, because you spend so much time with them, but that's fine as long as you don't like kiss or on the photocopier, in which case you've suddenly been, uh, that's infidelity, and your marriage is now going to have to end. It
yeah,
seems kind of ridiculous.
yeah. And as a weird kind of say example slash analogy of that, I have a friend who we've been friends for many, many years. We are both heterosexual men, and he's also in a very happy long-term monogamous relationship. We talk a lot. We talk most days, like random messages and stuff. For a while, we had a weekly kind of date because we don't live near each other. We had like a weekly date set where we would play Xbox online together.
Okay, yeah.
Every week, same day, every week for like a whole Thursday evening every week. We would go online and we'd play Xbox together. Now, for most, say, monogamous relationships, that's completely fine. If we were going and having sex once a week, whoa, that's a big fucking problem. Like,
Yeah.
well, what does that matter? Because both of us are away from our partners during this time period.
Mhm.
What does it really matter what we're doing in that time? What
Yeah.
does it matter? Why is it that sex is a big deal? We were playing Xbox. We were playing computer games together. We could have been watching a film. We could have been just on the phone, just talking. If we were in person, we could have been at the pub having a drink. We could have been at a cafe having a coffee. All of that is fine. But if it's we're in a hotel room having sex, whoa, big fucking problem. What does it matter? If we're still away from our say partners for the same amount of time. That Thursday evening, I was doing my own thing. Why does it
Mhm.
matter what the thing I'm doing is? And why is 99% of activities I could be doing allowed and okay, but if it's sexual, whoa, big fucking problem.
Yeah. I wonder if, to some extent, this, I mean, it is somewhat historical. I mean, in the past, not only society and the idea of sort of getting married and having kids and so on, but in the past where if you were, particularly as a woman, if you were unfaithful to your husband, then the kids could not be his, which I understand is actually much more common even today than people believe. Um,
Yeah,
but so it might have made more difference. And of course, there's always the problem of spreading diseases and things. So there is kind of you know a sensible way, there's a sensible reason for monogamy in that respect. But we have so much more understanding now. We live in a much more modern society. We can wear condoms. You can have safe sexual practices. And in fact, to some extent, I mean, coming from sort of the fetish scene, where there's kink things, um, your sexual practices may actually not be very sexual at all. So, I mean, I know people who are very into rope and shibari, and so their thing that wouldn't be accepted, like you say, instead of playing Xbox, could be tying each other up, or tying and doing suspension ties or something. That's not a sexual practice. There's no reason to worry about either pregnancy or sort of disease. So why would that matter? And yet somehow I think that the monogamous other partner would still consider that in the same way. Um, but like I say, we have condoms, we have the STIs that can be passed around are much better understood. From what I understand, from my experience over the last few years, people who are polyamorous or non-monogamous tend to be very, very much more open and go to the sexual health clinic much more regularly than monogamous couples who presumably don't need to, because obviously they're all completely faithful all the time. So this is something that is dealt with. Um, And I think these days we can be fairly sure that most people aren't accidentally getting pregnant by someone else that they're seeing. So those things have sort of ceased to be a problem, really. So yeah, why does it matter if you're playing Xbox or having sex?
Yeah, it doesn't as long as you're not bringing anything home and you're bringing, and there's a thing as well, I guess, within certain boundaries. But I guess it's the thing, if you're polyamorous or non-monogamous, and you probably have the conversation with your partner about safe sex in terms of when
Mhm.
you're having sex with other people, other partners.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's yeah, and that's one of the things that we talked about previously with communication. Like when I've found that a lot of, say, either people I've had sexual relationships with, or people that it's been a possibility, and we've talked about it potentially um, becoming that, even if it did or didn't, that people are generally quite open about talking about safe sex. And, oh, have you had a STI test recently? What were the results? Oh, it's been a while. Do you mind having another one? Or, oh, how
Mm.
many people? Oh, you've had one 2 months ago and it was all clear. Brilliant. How many people have you had sex with? Many people since then? Three people.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for my personal boundary, do you mind having another test before we do anything? Yeah. Perfect. Like, and it's
Yeah.
those conversations are always very, very easy to have. It never feels awkward. It never feels
Yeah.
embarrassing. It's just getting out information. Okay, let's see where we both stand. And
Yes,
um,
so much so. I've got another cute story for you. Um, Locally, there is a van that was doing STI testing, like in the high street. It
yeah,
like in a van in the high street, so you could go in and register, and they were giving, basically it was like we've brought the STI, like the sexual health clinic, to the high street, so it's easy for people to access, and we can talk about it and give out free condoms and stuff. And so me and a couple of friends, neither of whom are partners of mine, we decided to make a date, and we went down to the to the van to do because it's easier than going to the local clinic. So we went
yeah,
down to the van, and then went to a local cafe for lunch, and that was a date with a couple of friends. We just
yeah,
decided um, because it's not just with your partners you talk about this. It is talked about a lot more in both in the sort of kink scene and in the poly E&M scene. I think. I guess in the swinging scene, which isn't something I'm very familiar with as well, it would be very sort of discussed and openly talked about. Um, but going back to what you're saying about it's fine for you to play Xbox, but is it not fine for you to be, having sex with your friend? Um, I think perhaps historically as well, the issue around that is that when someone went off and told their partner they were going to the pub, but they were actually going to have sex with someone else, it's because they didn't tell the partner.
yeah,
So it was less the act and more of the fact that it was seen as shameful, I guess, which comes from, again, social, potentially religious sort of upbringing. And therefore it would be hidden. And that lack of communication is what causes the issues rather than the actual act itself.
yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've talked about ad nauseum, about the thing of the ethical non-monogamy. People don't understand it. Generally, monogamous people don't understand it, and they can't get their head around it. They don't know how people do it. A lot of people will think it's wrong, or that it doesn't end well and it's always a failure. All of that stuff.
Hmm.
Unethical non-monogamy, on the other hand, they all know about that. Everyone
Oh,
knows about
yes.
cheating. Everyone knows about affairs. That's normal. If you tell someone, "Oh yeah, I'm non-monogamous. I have like multiple partners," they go, "What? What the fuck? How does that work? That I don't understand. That doesn't make sense." If you say, "Oh, I'm cheating on my wife," or "I'm having an affair," they go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Because they know, they understand it. They may not agree with it, but they understand it because
Hmm.
unethical non-monogamy is so normalized, and that just shows actually how much non-monogamy there is in the world. It's just that a good chunk of it is not done ethically.
Yes. Yeah. I hadn't thought of it from that sort of point of view, but yeah, you're exactly right. It happens. I think I read the statistic that in the UK that about 10% of people um, are not fathered by the person they think.
That's a
Um,
fucking shocking number. If
yeah,
that's the actual percentage,
don't
yeah, that's
quote me. It's a number I've got out of my head from something I read a while back, and I've got no way of fact checking. Well, no, I mean, I guess I could Google it, um, but it's something like that. Is that a lot of people are actually? the person they believe is their father is not actually their father. So, it's not all the guys going off and, sleeping around behind their wives' backs. There's obviously a bit of, wives getting a bit on the side as well. And like you say, that's not right necessarily, but it is kind of accepted that it's a thing that happens.
Yeah, and
Whereas
generally
yeah.
when you hear about these things, and you see it in film and TV and things, it's because it's normally portrayed as like the person who is having the affair is kind of justified because they're not happy in the relationship, or they're not happy with like their partner doesn't put enough effort into their relationship, so they go and
Mhm.
they get the attention elsewhere. So therefore, they're
Yeah,
not ever portrayed as the bad person. They're portrayed as their partner's a bad person for not giving them enough attention. So they're going to find it elsewhere, and they're justified. Like, no, 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 they are still cheating. Like, it doesn't
yeah,
matter what the reasons are. They're still cheating. If it's that bad and you're not happy in your relationship, talk to your partner, communicate with them, see what you can do to make the relationship work, or end the relationship. So we've been going for a little while now, so let's get on to some questions. And these
okay,
should be kind of short. I'm not expecting long answers, just kind of the first thing that comes to your head. So I'll
okay.
start with what have been some of the most rewarding aspects of practicing non-monogamy for you? I feel like maybe we something that we've already covered when you talked about the fact of being able to, like, you have your own time to yourself. You're not tied down to someone 24/7, so you have your own time where you can kind of spend it how you want and do the things you want to do. But is there anything else that comes to the top of your head?
I think that reaching, like, seeing your partner's compersion, which is something we haven't really mentioned, but the idea of, like, I loved, I okay, so I love when my partner is going on a date or going to see their partner and they're spending some really lovely quality time together. Those things, genuinely make me happy for that person. Um, and seeing my 2 partners when they met and they got on, that makes me really genuinely really happy because that's 2 people that I love in different ways, but who are getting on together and, chatting and, you know, liking each other, and that is a really wonderful feeling, and that is one of the things I think that is very specific to non-monogamy and polyamory.
Yeah, you're completely right, and it may be worth mentioning for people that are listening that may not know that, because no, I think you're right. I don't think compersion has actually come up on this podcast at all yet. But I think compersion is very broadly um, described as being the opposite of jealousy. So it's when you feel happy feelings for, in this case, in the terms of relationships, your partner doing something, rather
Yes.
than feeling bad and feeling negative about them doing something with someone else. You feel happy about them doing something with someone else.
Yes.
And no, you're
Uh,
right. Well, that's again, I think that's one of the early things you learn. To feel bad about things, you can feel happy for someone. Doesn't even have to be someone you care about, but just someone you care about being happy. You can feel happiness for them.
yeah. So, I think also it's worth, well, it's worth mentioning from my point of view to your listeners. I think that when you're exploring this sort of idea for the first time, trying to get your head around the fact that there is a difference because people okay, so people talk about, wondering how they're gonna cope with the jealousy. And I'd say, first of all, there doesn't necessarily have to be the jealousy. It doesn't necessarily have to happen. I don't feel jealousy when my partner is seeing another partner. I don't feel jealous. What you might feel is envy, and that's a different thing. And I know that there's different descriptions, but my description of these things, not from the dictionary, would be that jealousy is where I don't want that person to be doing that thing. So I don't want my partner to be sleeping with someone else or having sex with someone else because I want them to not have that. Envy is when I'm like, okay, so my partner's out having a really good time. Tonight, I'm home feeling a bit lonely. I wish I was out having a good time with them. I'm really
Yeah,
happy that they're out having a good time, but I'm feeling that I'm missing something because right now I need, but that's about me needing something that I don't have right now. Does that make sense? As opposed to, it's not that I don't want them to have it, it's that I want something. Just happens
yeah,
to be something that they're having right now.
Yeah, and that's the exact same descriptions I use for jealousy and envy. And I think
Yeah.
envy is actually a lot more prevalent than jealousy, but people don't know how to um sort of pick between the two or know what it is they're feeling. But
Mhm.
yeah, that
Yeah.
like a way that I like to think of it is with jealousy and envy is, say if I had a friend that was going to a concert to see a particular band and they invited me and I thought, yeah, I want to go, I really like this band, but I couldn't get a ticket. So there's two different ways of feeling. There's one, which is what I would call jealousy, which is me saying, "Oh, well, I can't go, so I don't like the fact you're going.
Yeah.
I would rather you not go because I'm not going." That's
Mhm. Yeah.
jealousy. Envy would be, I'm not happy that you're going, but it's not that I don't want you to go. I just kind of wish I was there as well. I wish I could
Yeah.
also go. And again, like you say, it's that thing of missing out. Like I also want the thing. It's not me saying I
Yes.
don't want you to have the thing. It's saying no, you can have it. I just kind of wish I had it too.
Yeah. And compersion is where you're like, "Okay, I couldn't get a ticket, but you're going to see this band, and that's amazing, and I'm so happy that you're going to get to see them because they're amazing."
Yeah, exactly. And it could also, I mean, comparison goes one further than that, where it could be a band that I don't even want to see, but my friend or my partner or whatever, they're excited to see the band, so I'm happy for them. Like, it's not my, I
Yes.
don't understand it. I wouldn't enjoy it, but you're clearly happy
Mhm.
about it, so I feel good for you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to the next question, which
Mm.
is, um, if you could go back in time to when you first started exploring non-monogamy, is there anything you would do differently based on the experiences you've had since and what you've learned?
Um, no, I don't think so, not specifically about the non-monogamy. I think if I could go back an extra sort of 30 years to my younger self and explain to myself that this thing was a possibility and that I should explore it earlier in my life, I would do that. Um, but I think I know some people say, well, there's books that you should read, like The Ethical Slut and others. Um, I haven't. I've read some. I haven't done a huge amount of research. I think it's possible to get very caught up in the. You really need to research this before you take the step, particularly for couples who are in a relationship or a marriage who are thinking about opening up that relationship. Because if you get it wrong, you could wreck something that could otherwise have been a good relationship. And I think that would be a shame. Um, I didn't do a huge amount of reading. I think I learnt a lot from a lot of people that I talked to, and I was able to go to, the pub when there's a sort of a meet-up of polyamorous people, like a poly meet-up, and I was able to talk to other people who were poly. So, I had that. The reason it was somewhat limited was actually because then COVID,
Yeah.
and so I was somewhat limited. But I think that I had access to all that. So I guess my advice to people as they start up, as they start looking at this as a possibility, is to go and find people, not just one or two, but go and meet up with polyamorous people and talk to them about their experiences. Listen to a podcast like this one that's really good and will give you a wide range of views, because that will give you an idea of things to look out for. And I know that I've spoken to couples, and I'm always really happy to speak to couples or single people who are new to either the sort of the kink scene or to poly, and I talk to them about my experiences and I give them some hints, and I'm not an expert. I'm not, in any way an expert at this, but it's possible to sort of say things to them and sort of go, have you considered these questions? Um, and sometimes that can really make them go, oh, okay, yeah, these are things we need to think about. um, so yeah, talking to more people. I think I would have liked to have met up in person with more people at the beginning, but COVID was on, so I had to kind of wait a bit, which was a shame, but obviously there was nothing I could do about that at the time.
Yeah, unfortunately. But,
Mhm.
you made it here to where you are now, so it all worked
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you. That's one of the bits of advice I would give as well that I think was really helpful to me. I read so many things online, and I try not to read. Early on, I tried not to read things like books or listen to podcasts because I don't want just one person's point of view. I don't want one person telling me this is how I do things, so you should do it my way. No, I want to read different things. I want to try and read experiences from different people, and even from doing that, it wasn't until I actually went out into the real world with real polyamorous people, like you've said, like poly meetups, and seeing people actually live it out, and
Yeah,
seeing I'll be sat talking to a couple, and then one of the people that I'm talking to gets up and goes and sits with someone else who, and they're cuddling up with them because they're their other partner. And I, I,
yeah,
I really can't put into words how big of an impact on that had on me, how helpful it was to actually see. Before that, it was all kind of theoretical. You can read things online, but you're not actually seeing it. Actually seeing it physically, um, non-monogamous relationships actually happening in front of my eyes was like, oh, it was eye-opening in a way. Like, oh, I get it. Like
mhm,
this can actually work. I'm seeing it work. It's not all theory. It's not all people telling stories, making things up online. Like I can see it with my own eyes. It's actually happening and it's actually working. And I really think that that's and people may be different, but I definitely agree with you that that is one of the first steps that people should take,
yeah,
is try and get out into the real world and talk to real people who are already living lifestyles, and even just living in that and just witnessing it and seeing it, even before you talk to anyone, I think could have a big impact. But then
yeah,
especially talking to people, you're going to get so much more information from talking to people that are already living it than you are reading things online or even in listening to podcasts. Like as much as the whole point of this podcast is to get different people with different perspectives and people can listen to that, you're still not going to get as much out of listening to me and my guests on this podcast talking as you are going to have a face-to-face one-on-one discussion with someone where you can ask them questions yourself and they can ask you and they can impart advice onto you that maybe I haven't thought of, or Susie hasn't thought of, or anyone that's on the podcast hasn't thought of. So
yeah,
that really is an invaluable bit of advice, I think, is to
yeah.
get out there, meet people, talk to people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, if you're talking to actual people rather than just listening to this or reading a book, then they can offer you advice specific to your situation potentially,
Exactly,
rather
yeah.
than it being just a general, this is E&M, the whole of it.
Yeah, and you could scroll, you could scroll the internet for forever trying to find someone talking about something which is pertinent to your exact situation and never find it. Whereas if you talk
Hmm.
to someone face to face, you can say, here is my situation. Do you have any advice on this specific thing? They may
Yeah.
say no. They may say yes. They may only be able to give you a little bit of advice which is somewhat related, but you will get somewhere, and you'll probably find it extremely helpful.
Hmm. Absolutely. I agree with you totally on that.
So next question then, because actually one of the questions I was going to ask you, you actually answered within that, which is what advice would you give to someone who is newly exploring? So we've killed two birds with one stone there. Um,
Hmm.
Another thing I want to ask you is, are there any particular myths about either non-monogamy or polyamory or swinging or any of these things that you think are important to debunk? Things that, are commonly said, which actually you think just aren't true, and people would be better off not being taught those things to begin with.
Well, funnily enough, I don't think that I've heard many of these myths, but maybe that's because I haven't gone looking. Um, it's a bit like, if I describe myself as being bisexual, I tend to use pansexual these days, but if I describe myself as being bisexual, apparently loads of people are going to tell me that I'm either just being greedy or that I'm undecided. Well, no one's ever said those things to me.
Yeah,
So, and no one's ever really said anything to me about when I sort of say I'm poly, and I'm quite open about it with work and so on. Um, I will say, "Oh, I'm seeing a partner," or "I actually am seeing my other partner." And when people sort of go, "Well, hang on a minute, I thought your partner was down here." I was like, "No, no, this is the other one. This is another partner."
yeah.
And I just talk about it openly. I don't think I've had very many responses where people pull up kind of real myths. And I don't know if that's more that it's a little bit more aware, or maybe the people that I've talked to, that I've worked with, or so on, are just happier to accept it. I mean, I do get questions, like people sort of say, "Oh, that's unusual. That's interesting. Like, how does that work?" And so I explain a bit. Um, but I've not had anyone say anything particular that makes me go, "Oh God, not that again." Whereas, by comparison, about 15 years ago, when I identified as a lesbian, because now my friends will all tell you I identify as an ex-lesbian or potentially just a very bad lesbian. But uh, me and my first wife would quite often be asked by straight young men, generally, usually young, um, if that being a lesbian meant that we would let other people watch. And that always amazed me. I was like, I'm sorry, what planet are you on? Um, but yeah, the being poly thing, I've not had any particular myths. I know people sort of might, well, so I've been told, might say we're all sex mad. Uh, Not necessarily. Some of us are, maybe. They might say that we're being greedy. I was like, no, we're managing relationships in an adult and very compassionate way with more than one person because that's the amount of love we have to give. But those things haven't been said to me personally. So,
No, no, but I think those are really good answers. And yeah, well, as you said about the whole being greedy thing, like I've seen online, people saying things like, "What? So do you just like have sex with all your friends?" And I think, well, no, that's not really what it is or how it works. But actually, in a way, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I do ask them first, is what I like to
Yeah,
say if someone says
exactly.
something like that.
Yeah,
Like,
I think people
not
think
just
it's
like
just a free
randomly,
for
not
all.
like, I like you, so we have to have sex now. I mean, it's not how it works at all. But
Yeah, and I think this is something I've talked to someone on a previous episode about, that when you go to like say kink events or swing events or sex clubs or anything, that you get a type of person who thinks that because you're there, because you're kinky, because you're um at a sex club or whatever, it means that you want to do those things with absolutely anyone that offers it to you, which I
yeah,
think that is like that is the biggest myth going.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
So, one last question I have for you, which is,
Yep.
off the top of your head, if you had to sum up non-monogamy for yourself in a handful of words, what would they be?
Um,
The answer
like,
to this question always begins with an I'm just going to
yes,
put that out there.
trying to bring it down to a concise description. So for me, polyamory or ethical non-monogamy is the freedom to choose to have very adult and well informed communicative relationships with more than one partner.
That's great. That's a really good answer.
Yay! I
There's
win.
no follow-up with that. That's just a small question that I like to put at the end.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Super.
So, to anyone who is listening, remember, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to spinningtheteapodcast@outlook.com and follow us on social media for all podcast updates. And I'll see you next time when I spill more tea on non-monogamy.